In the deep silence of the prairie night, the fires burned low. The air smelled of wood smoke and fear. Families gathered what little they could carry: a few blankets, a clay pot, a small pouch of seeds. Behind them, the world they had known for generations was fading into shadow. Far in the distance, the rhythm of marching boots broke the stillness. Soldiers sent by a government that hungered for land. To them, this was progress. To the Shawnee, it was the sound of erasure. But among the trees, something stirred. A decision made not in anger, but in quiet defiance. Some would not wait for the treaties, for the false promises inked on paper. They would vanish into the wilderness, beyond reach. They would become ghosts in the forest, unseen but unbroken. They would later be called the Absentee-Shawnee, as if they had gone missing. But they had not disappeared. They had chosen a harder path, a path of exile that would one day become their legacy. This is their story, a story of endurance, of spirit, of a people who refuse to be written out of history. Because when a nation tries to erase you, survival itself becomes a sacred act of rebellion. And so, beneath the vanishing fires of their homelands, the Absentee-Shawnee began their long journey, carrying with them not possessions, but a fire that would never die. Long before borders carved the land, before maps drew lines through rivers and valleys, there was a people who moved with the rhythm of the earth, the Shawnee. They lived where the forests whispered and the rivers curved like veins of life through the land we now call Ohio, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. Their villages rested near the water's edge, where the soil was rich and the wind carried the scent of cedar and corn. To the Shawnee, the land was not something to own, it was something to belong to. Every stone, every tree, every stream held a spirit, a memory, a song. Families lived in longhouses built from saplings and bark. Children learned early to listen, not just to elders, but to the wind, to the animals, to the silence. The Shawnee believed that balance held the world together. If you took from the earth, you gave something back. If you hunted, you prayed. If you spoke truth. They were divided into clans: panther, wolf, turtle, and others, each with a sacred role in the harmony of the tribe. Leadership was earned through wisdom, not wealth. Strength was measured in service, not conquest. Their spiritual life flowed like their rivers, steady, unbroken. Ceremonies celebrated the sun and moon, planting and harvest, birth and death, all part of a circle that had no end. Then came the outsiders, first traders, then settlers. They brought tools of iron, cloth of bright colors, and words wrapped in promises. But behind those promises came something else: hunger for land and an empire's shadow. As the years turned, the Shawnee found themselves surrounded. The forests grew smaller, the rivers no longer theirs alone. The peace of the old world trembled, and in that trembling, choices had to be made. Some would stand and fight, others would seek safety and distance, and a few, a brave, quiet few, would disappear into the unknown, carrying the memory of their homeland in their hearts. The 19th century dawned with the sound of marching feet and rustling papers, treaties, proclamations, and orders that would redraw the map of a continent. For the Shawnee, each treaty was not just a document, but a wound. Every signature meant another river lost, another forest surrendered, another promise broken. In the eyes of the American government, progress demanded removal. The dream of manifest destiny was spreading like wildfire, and it burned through native homelands without mercy. The Shawnee were told they must move west of the Mississippi to make way for settlers who saw their land as empty, their villages as temporary, their people as obstacles to expansion. But among the Shawnee, not all would wait for removal. There were those who refused to be led into exile under military guard, those who would not trade their freedom for a ration of corn and salt. Quietly, with dignity and pain, families gathered their children, their sacred bundles, and what they could carry. Before the ink of the next treaty could dry, they slipped away into the wilderness. These were the Absentee-Shawnee, not absent by choice, but by defiance. They vanished westward, crossing the Mississippi into Missouri, then farther south into Arkansas and Texas. Their journey was a test of endurance. Hunger gnawed at them, disease shadowed their camps, and the hostility of settlers followed wherever they went. Yet they walked on. In every step there was prayer. In every fire, a spark of hope. The elders told the children that the Creator walked with them, even when their path was dark. By the 1830s, they had reached the wild frontier of Texas, a land of danger and promise. There, they sought refuge among other displaced nations and even forged uneasy peace with the Comanche. But the borderlands offered no true safety. When Texas became part of the United States, the soldiers came again. Once more, the Absentee-Shawnee gathered their few belongings and began to move. To the settlers, they were invisible. To the government, they were merely absent. But in truth, they were present in the most powerful way, living between worlds, unbroken, unseen, and unyielding. In the untamed wilderness of Texas, the Absentee-Shawnee lived like wind among the trees, everywhere and nowhere. They had no borders, no map, only the instinct to survive. The frontier was unforgiving, ruled by storms, hunger, and the constant threat of violence. But through it all, the Shawnee spirit endured. Their villages rose along quiet streams, hidden from prying eyes. Women planted small patches of corn and beans in secret clearings. Children gathered herbs and firewood, listening as elders whispered stories of the old country, of rivers that sang and forests that once seemed endless. These stories became their heartbeat, their connection to what had been stolen. The men hunted across the plains, sometimes trading furs and meat for supplies. Others worked as scouts or interpreters for settlers and soldiers, walking a thin line between survival and betrayal. They were strangers in every land, trusted by none, guided only by the memory of who they were. Among neighboring tribes, the Absentee-Shawnee found both friendship and tension. Some sought refuge with the Comanche or the Kickapoo, forming fragile alliances. Others were drawn back northward, following rumors of safety in Indian territory. Yet wherever they went, danger followed. Disease swept through camps. Skirmishes erupted with settlers who viewed them as trespassers. And still, they endured. Their resilience was quiet, almost invisible, not in great battles or speeches, but in the simple acts of living. A mother teaching her child to speak Shawnee words by the firelight. An elder offering prayers to the rising sun. A small community gathering to dance beneath the stars, even when it was forbidden. By the mid-1800s, many Absentee-Shawnee families made their way north once more, settling along the Little River and near what is now Norman, Oklahoma. There, in the shadow of loss, they began to rebuild. Their language was faint, their ceremonies few, but the ember of their identity still glowed. It had survived war, disease, and exile. It had survived the silence of the world. And though history called them absentees, they were anything but gone. They were the living echo of a people who refused to vanish, the heartbeat of a nation reborn in the shadows. By the time the Absentee-Shawnee reached the rolling plains of what would become Oklahoma, generations had already passed since they left their homeland in the east. Their feet had crossed rivers and deserts, their eyes had seen too many partings. But now, here, they began to rebuild. The land was rough, untamed hills, deep woods, and wide prairies where the wind never rested. Yet for the first time in decades, they could breathe. They settled near Little River, close to other displaced tribes, the Potawatomi, the Sac and Fox, and the Kickapoo. Each carried its own story of loss, but also of endurance. Together, they wove a fragile peace. The Absentee-Shawnee planted corn and squash, built log cabins, and gathered for councils beneath the open sky. They were determined to create a future their children could call home. But in their hearts, there was still a quiet ache, the memory of rivers that no longer belonged to them, of ancestors buried far away. Then came the Civil War, tearing the Indian Territory apart. Both the Union and the Confederacy sought Native allies, offering promises that never lasted. Once again, the Absentee-Shawnee found themselves caught between two worlds not of their making. Armies marched through their lands, taking supplies and burning what little they had. Many fled deeper into the woods, choosing survival over allegiance. When the war ended, the promises were gone. The U.S. government turned its attention to civilizing the tribes. Through the Dawes Act and other laws, communal lands were divided and sold. Traditional ceremonies were banned, and children were sent to boarding schools where they were forbidden to speak their language or practice their faith. But some fires cannot be extinguished. The Absentee-Shawnee carried their traditions in secret, a song whispered at night, a prayer offered before dawn, a language spoken softly between generations. Their spirit endured, invisible but unbroken. In 1936, the United States finally recognized them as a sovereign tribe under the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act. The name Absentee-Shawnee remained, once a mark of exile, now a symbol of survival. They had crossed centuries of loss to reclaim a single truth. They were still here. The 20th century brought both progress and new battles for the Absentee-Shawnee. They had survived removal, war, and erasure, but survival alone was not enough. It was time to reclaim what had been taken: identity, voice, and pride. In the small communities of Little Axe and Shawnee, Oklahoma, the people began to gather again, elders, storytellers, and children sitting beneath the same sky that had once witnessed their ancestors' flight. They spoke of Tecumseh, the warrior whose dream of native unity had once ignited the forests of the East. They spoke of Tenskwatawa, his brother, the prophet, who had taught that a nation's strength lived not in its weapons, but in its spirit. The younger generation listened, and something ancient stirred. They began to revive ceremonies once forbidden by law: the green corn dance, the stomp dances, the sacred songs that honored the spirits of earth and sky. The language, long silenced by schools and shame, was whispered again in classrooms and homes. Each word spoken became a seed, planting hope in the soil of the future. In time, the Absentee-Shawnee Nation established its own government, schools, and health services, not as remnants of a broken people, but as proof of endurance. They built cultural programs to preserve their traditions, held gatherings to honor their veterans, and created opportunities for their youth to learn both the wisdom of their elders and the knowledge of the modern world. Their story was no longer one of exile, it was a story of return. The name absentee no longer meant lost or forgotten. It meant those who refused to surrender, those who walked away only to find themselves again. In the quiet rhythm of the drum, in the laughter of children learning old words anew, the spirit of a people who had once disappeared into the wilderness now resounded louder than ever. The Absentee-Shawnee had proven what the fires of their ancestors had always promised: that a nation built on memory, faith, and courage can never truly die. Today, the Absentee-Shawnee Nation stands as a living testament to survival against impossible odds. From the forests of the Great Lakes to the plains of Oklahoma, their story is one of constant motion, yet unbroken identity. Each generation carries within it the memory of the trail, the echo of drums that once called their ancestors home. In Shawnee, Oklahoma, the tribe's capital, the old and the new coexist. Tribal programs support education, healthcare, and cultural preservation. Yet beyond the offices and classrooms lies something deeper, a quiet strength that cannot be measured in buildings or budgets. It lives in the songs sung at dusk, in the hands that still craft beadwork and ribbon shirts, and in the stories told by elders beneath the stars. To outsiders, the Absentee-Shawnee may seem like one small nation among many. But to those who know their history, They are a symbol of something larger, the unyielding will of Native America. They are proof that even when torn from homeland and heritage, the flame of identity can never be extinguished. Their journey reminds us that freedom is not merely the absence of chains. It is the courage to remember who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. The Absentee-Shawnee walk proudly today, a people of faith, resilience, and quiet defiance. Their legacy is not trapped in the past. It breathes in the present and reaches toward the future. For in every drumbeat and every prayer whispered to the wind, their ancestors live on, still guiding them, still watching over them, and still reminding the world that some spirits were never meant to be conquered. The story of the Absentee-Shawnee tribe is not just a chapter of Native American history. It is a mirror held up to humanity itself. It asks us, what endures when everything else is taken away? For the Absentee-Shawnee, the answer lies in the unseen, in the spirit that refuses to fade. They lost lands, homes, even language for a time. Yet through every hardship, they carried within them something the world could not strip away: the sacred memory of who they are. Their history is a song that has never stopped playing, even when silence tried to drown it out. From the forests of the Great Lakes to the plains of Oklahoma, from ancient ceremonies to modern classrooms, their rhythm continues, steady, proud, alive. And as the world changes around them, the Absentee-Shawnee continue to evolve, balancing tradition with progress. Their youth walk two roads at once, one leading into the digital age and one leading back to the fires of their ancestors. Both roads, in the end, lead home. When you listen closely, when you allow their story to speak, you hear something universal: the will to endure, the power of memory, the beauty of belonging. So as this story closes, remember, the Absentee-Shawnee were never truly absent. They were always here, walking quietly, remembering deeply, and reminding us that the truest strength does not roar. It endures. If this story moved you, take a moment to honor the resilience of those who came before us. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more untold histories of the world's ancient spirits and living nations. Because their voices are not forgotten, they are still echoing, waiting for us to listen.